There are decades that shape a nation, and then there are decades that shape a family. For my family, the 1960s did both, sometimes at the exact same moment. This is Smith history, separating the Smith from the myth, where I take legends we grew up with, hold them up to the light, and see which ones are true and which ones are just too good to fact check. Today's episode is called Growing Up in the 1960s. This is part 1. And let me tell you, if you didn't grow up in the 1960s, you missed an incredible decade, where it seemed like every day brought something new, something never seen before, and something we would never see again. I'm Brian Smith, the oldest of the 5 Smith boys, the original model off the assembly line, the prototype, the one who arrived first and therefore had the longest head start on collecting stories, memories, and questionable decisions. Brother Jeff came next, known in family lore as number 2, and then in a feat of maternal endurance that should qualify my mother for sainthood, the twins, Rick and Randy, arrived in the early 1960s. That's 4 boys in a little more than 4.5 years. That's not a family, that's a science experiment. Now, Brother Kyle will have to wait to the 1970s. As for me, the 1960s were a glorious time to be alive. When the decade dawned, I was just over 2 years old. Jeff was about 1.5 years. And even though I was just a toddler, I have these vivid Technicolor flashes of memory. Little gifts from the past that still return to me like postcards from another world. My early memories are warm, being at Grandma and Grandpa Butterman's house. They were my grandparents with the funny name. Looking back, my mom loved that house with the wraparound porch. She grew up there, and she seemed to always want to go back to the Butterman house. One of my earliest memories is sitting on my dad's lap, watching the Ohio State Buckeyes basketball team during their golden age. This wasn't just basketball. This was religion, ritual, and family identity that was passed down through the years to our sons, daughters, and grandkids. From 1960 to 1962, Ohio State made 3 straight NCAA championship games, winning the national title in 1960. That team, Jerry Lucas, John Havlicek, Bobby Knight, Larry Siegfried, Coach Fred Taylor, it was a powerhouse. They were the Beatles of college basketball before the Beatles ever hit America. And I can still see and hear my dad yelling at our little black and white TV like it was a 2-way radio. I knew it was an important game because Dad wasn't just yelling at the players. I remember he was also yelling at Mom. And I kid you not, this is what I actually remember he said to her one particular game, probably the championship game. She walked from the kitchen and Dad would say, "Every time you come into the room, Ohio State plays worse. Stay in the kitchen." Now, in today's world, that line would get you canceled, or at least dirty looks before halftime. But in the 1960s, in the Smith household, it was simply evidence of Buckeye fanaticism, a trait he passed down to all 5 of his sons and all of his grandkids like a dominant gene. People wonder why the Smith family is so fanatical about Ohio State. Well, it's in our DNA. We didn't choose the Buckeyes chose us. Another early memory, the day Mom left us in the car. I remember Mom driving me and baby Jeff downtown in Marion, Ohio. I can still go to the exact same parking spot today. That's how deeply it's etched in my mind. It's probably April 1962. I remember Mom told me, "You stay in the car, I'll be right back." Now, why a mother in 1962 thought a 4-year-old boy would listen, especially me, that's a mystery for the ages. Now, she was pregnant and about 4 months away from having 9-pound apiece twins. So that may account for her bad decisions that day. Anyway, after a few minutes waiting for Mom to return, I got worried. I remember vividly Jeff was in his little car seat. He was about 2.5 years old. And I told him, very responsibly, "You stay in the car. I'm going to look for Mom." Because if I wasn't going to listen to Mom, I'm sure he would. I recall walking around to the front of the building. It was a busy street full of cars and people. A woman gave me a plain donut, the universal pastry of concerned adults, but it had no icing, so I wasn't interested. I held on to it and I continued to search. A policeman steered me away from the busy street, took me to look for Mom. Now looking back, I wonder what Mom thought when she returned to the car, only to find a 2.5-year-old in the car alone, and a 4-year-old missing. And I wonder how embarrassed she was when the policeman showed up with me in tow. It was a different time. It was a time of President Kennedy, classic cars, the dawn of the space program, and new technological wonders. A time when wandering 4-year-olds were less a crisis and more a community project. The next memory is August 1962, Park Boulevard, where we lived. I remember walking to our driveway as Dad and Mom were getting into the car. They were going to the hospital to have the twins. It was probably August 6th, 1962. Our neighbor was outside, and I proudly remember saying to him, "My mom is going to the hospital to have a baby." Mom was quite embarrassed for me to say that, but I was a precocious, chatty, natural-born narrator, a precursor for the years as a podcaster. But here's the funny thing about memory. I do remember telling that neighbor, but I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember the twins coming home. Just that one little moment, like a single frame of film from a much larger reel. Memory is like that, especially distant memory. It keeps what it wants and it tosses the rest into a cosmic recycling bin. Then a year later, it's now November 1963. I remember Mom celebrating my 6th birthday on November 13th. And then, 9 days later, history walked right into our living room.
Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died.
I was outside
at 1
playing on the
p.m.
sidewalk in front
Central
of our
Standard
house.
Time. 2
I
o'clock
recall Mom
Eastern
running
Standard
out the
Time,
front door.
some 38 minutes ago.
She grabbed me and rushed me inside. It was November 22nd, 1963. History not only walked into my life, it hit me head on. President John F. Kennedy had been shot. That day changed the country, and it changed me. I became a history buff on a day filled with history. In the days that followed, even as a 6-year-old, I could feel the tension, not just in our home, but through the black and white TV. The whole nation felt like it was holding its breath. I remember sitting in the back seat with Jeff. He was now 4. Mom and Dad were driving around Marion. I remember Dad saying, "People in this country just don't understand what's really going on. They don't know the score." Now, did Dad think there was more to the JFK story? I was too young to ask, too young to understand. But I was old enough to remember what he said. Then a day later, I remember Jeff and I were horsing around in front of the TV while Dad watched the live coverage of Lee Harvey Oswald being transferred from the Dallas County Jail.
There's the man with a gun.
We blocked Dad's view at the exact moment Oswald was shot. We literally got in the way of history. Then my memory jumps to 1964. I remember Mom was ironing and the radio was playing. But suddenly this magical new sound filled the room. It was the Beatles. It was like someone opened a window and let the sunlight back in. The black cloud that had hung over the country since November seemed to lift, at least for a moment. The early 1960s were full of these contrasts: tragedy and triumph, fear and wonder, loss and discovery. Mom and Dad's scrapbooks are filled with black and white images of the twins in their matching outfits, and my mom's sister Ruth holding the twins. To me, it's really a shame that the twins don't still wear matching outfits.
Yeah, baby!
I think I would enjoy that. Jeff and I were also in many of the pictures as well. My brief year and a half as the only child had evaporated like dew in the afternoon sun. But one thing is crystal clear in those early pictures. Our dad had bought a hair trimmer to save a few pennies on haircuts, and he butchered Jeff and my hair. Me in particular. I looked like an inmate from a concentration camp. Now today, those images of our terrible haircuts are forever captured on black and white celluloid and in Facebook memories forever. The world around us, well, while the 4 Smith boys were growing, the world was growing too. In politics, the early 1960s were the era of JFK, the new frontier, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and a nation trying to find its footing in a rapidly changing world. Sports, well, beyond the Buckeyes, the early 1960s saw the rise of Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain, the dominance of the Boston Celtics, and the early sparks of Muhammad Ali.
I am the greatest!
The AFL was created and competing with the National Football League. On television, shows like The Andy Griffith Show, Bonanza, and The Dick Van Dyke Show filled living rooms, including ours, with laughter and comfort. Hollywood gave us West Side Story, Lawrence of Arabia, and Mary Poppins, sweeping epics and magical escapes. America was racing to the moon. Rockets were launching, astronauts were becoming heroes, and that space program would eventually take our dad and all of us to Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach. But that is for the next podcast episode. This is part 1 of growing up in the 1960s, the early years, a time of new brothers, classic cars, young parents, and a world changing faster than any of us could understand. Now, my memories come in bits and pieces, but they're vivid, they're alive. And hopefully my family is listening, because I'm sharing some Smith stories maybe they've never heard before. And my slant on Smith history is often very different from theirs. But that is what separates the Smith from the myth. Please come back again for part 2 of Smith history, growing up in the 1960s. My name is Brian Smith, and we are history.